Okay, for the last video for this worksheet, we're going to look at some applications. And just like with the addition of integers worksheets, I've also thrown in a few problems where we're going to evaluate some algebraic expressions and do stuff with absolute value. But first, let's do the word problem. So example 5, it says solve each problem, include correct units with each answer. So for part A, it says at lunchtime, the temperature outside was 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature is expected to drop 18 degrees by midnight. What will the temperature be at midnight? Well, we're starting out at 15 degrees. We're expecting it to drop 18 degrees. So we're going to subtract positive 18. Okay? Now, as far as subtraction goes, this is one that's fairly obvious. You can kind of look at this one and you can sort of determine almost in your head what the answer is going to be. But again, for the sake of practice, let's go ahead and follow the official rules for subtraction. So first number stays the same. Instead of subtracting positive 18, I'm going to add negative 18. Okay. Now we're adding two numbers that have different signs. So that would tell me to subtract. 18 minus 15 is 3. And I have to ask myself, what do I have more of, positive or negative? I have 15 positives, but I have 18 negatives. So that tells me that negative is going to carry over into my final answer. So we would say the final temperature is negative 3 degrees. So you could say something like, at midnight, the temperature will be negative 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's it. You could also say something like, at midnight, the temperature will be 3 degrees below zero. That's a little excessive. I would stick with just negative 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Just be careful if you decide to say degrees below zero, say positive 3 degrees below zero. Okay? Now, part B is going to be one of the weird situations. The highest point in California is Mount Whitney at 14,497 feet. The lowest point in California is Death Valley at 282 feet below sea level. What is the difference in these elevations? Well, technically, you could draw a picture here and sort of see. So, like if we say this is sea level right here, we've got Mount Whitney. It's at 14,497 feet. And then we're going to call it Death Valley right here. This is negative 282 feet. What is the difference between these two values? Okay. So what we would do if we were going to write out a model that would represent the distance between these two or the difference in these two elevations, we would say, okay, Mount Whitney, we're at 14,497. We want the difference means subtract, and the difference is that we have the 14,497 for Mount Whitney, but Death Valley is a negative 282. So we're subtracting a negative in this case. Okay, so again, we're going to just follow the regular rules here. First number stays the same. And then we add the opposite of the second number. So we want to add the distance or the elevation of Death Valley. So we're going to add 282. Now, this is just regular old addition of two positive numbers. So off to the side, we've got 14,497 plus 282. Well, 7 plus 2 is 9. 9 plus 8 is 17. I'm going to keep a 7 and I'm going to carry a 1. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. There's nothing to add to the 4 or the 1, so I just drop those down. So we would say the difference in elevations is, I was about to put a dollar sign, it's late, is 14,779 feet. All right. And there you have it. So we have Mount Whitney up here, we've got sea level, and then we've got just below that, we've got Death Valley. What's the distance between the two? What's the difference in their elevations? It would be 14,779 feet. All right, next up, I think we have absolute value. Yes. So we have example 6, it just says evaluate. And in math, when we say evaluate, we just mean work it out, okay? And remember, when we were looking at the worksheet on adding integers, we had some situations similar to this. And I told you that absolute value could almost be treated kind of like grouping symbols. As long as inside the absolute value bars, you have addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, you would want to take care of what's inside the absolute value bars first, then find the absolute value. So step 1, simplify the inside And then step 2, find the absolute value. All right, so inside part A, we have negative 15 minus 10. Well, this is one that a lot of you I know can see right off the bat without doing any work. You can see the answer to this, but just for the sake of practice, we take negative 15 and instead of subtracting positive 10, we add negative 10. When adding two numbers with the same sign, you add and keep the sign. So 15 plus 10 is 25, and it ends up being negative 25. So this right here is going to simplify to the absolute value of negative 25. And remember, when we're talking about absolute value, we're interested in a number's distance from zero. So remember, absolute value represents a number's distance from zero. So how far is negative 25 from zero? Well, it's 25 units away. It happens to be 25 units to the left, but that's not what we're interested in. We just want to know how far is it from zero. So we would say the final answer here is 25. Now for part B, we have that tricky situation. This came up on the addition worksheet too. This right here stays. All right. If you have a negative on the outside, in front of the absolute value bars, it makes the whole thing negative. So this makes the result negative. And when we talk about multiplying integers, we can explain kind of a little bit more why, but for now, just know that negative in front of the absolute value bars, it's going to make the whole thing negative. So let's look at the inside. Inside the absolute value bars, we have positive 27 minus 40. So we want to keep the 27. And instead of subtracting positive 40, we're going to add negative 40. And now we're adding two numbers that have different signs. So that tells me to subtract. So I want to take 40, that has the larger absolute value, and subtract 27. Well, I can't take 7 from 0, so I borrow. 4 becomes 3, 0 becomes 10. 10 minus 7 is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. So we're dealing with 13, but we have to ask ourselves, is it positive or is it negative? Well, if you go back to where we started, we took away more than we had. So that tells me right off the bat we're negative. But following just the regular addition rules, you have to ask yourself, do I have more positive or do I have more negative? I have 27 positives, but I have 40 negatives. I have more negative. So that's going to follow through to our final answer. So this right here is negative absolute value of negative 13. And remember, when we first talked about absolute value, I think it was when we talked about absolute value, I said this is really like taking the absolute value and multiplying it by -1, which makes it negative. That'll make more sense very soon when we talk about multiplication. All right, so the absolute value of negative 13. We want to know how far is negative 13 from 0. It's 13 units away, but this right here is going to make the final result negative. Even though the absolute value of negative 13 is positive 13, this negative right here makes the final answer negative 13. Okay? Now, for the last example for this worksheet, and then I'm going to have to call it quits for the night. It is so hot in my house right now. I'm absolutely miserable. All right, so for example 7, it says replace each variable with the given value and then find each difference. This would be the same if I just told you to evaluate. We already talked about algebraic expressions. We looked at that in the first section of this chapter, and we knew that part of one of the things that we learned how to do in that section is how to evaluate algebraic expressions. So just know the directions could say something like replace each variable with the given value and then find each difference, or the directions could just say evaluate, and you need to know that that's what you're supposed to do. So for part A, we have y minus 9, but this right here tells me that I want to evaluate when y is negative 22. So I'm going to rewrite this algebraic expression y minus 9, but I'm going to replace the y with negative 22. So y is negative 22, and then from that I want to subtract 9. Okay, and again, this is a pretty easy one where a lot of you might just see the answer. That's fine, but understand the process just in case you get stuck. So first number stays the same. And then instead of subtracting positive 9, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to add negative 9. So now we're adding two numbers with the same sign, so we truly add. So I get 22 plus 9. If you can't do that one in your head, do the side work. This one you can probably do in your head, but if not, that's fine. 9 plus 2 is 11, so I keep a 1, carry a 1. 2 plus 1 is 3, so I get 31. And because both of these numbers were negative to begin with, that makes my final answer negative 31. So when we evaluate y minus 9 for negative 22, we get negative 31. All right, last up, we have part B, which is 12 minus x, okay? And then we have this part right here. This part is telling me, hey, evaluate this expression when x is negative 14. So we're going to rewrite the whole expression, and wherever I see an x, I'm going to replace it with negative 14. So we have 12 minus x, but x is negative 14. So 12 minus negative 14. Following the rules for subtraction, we keep the 12. And then instead of subtracting negative 14, we want to add the opposite of negative 14. So that means I want to add positive 14. And then 12 plus 14, you can probably do that in your head. If not, you can go over to the side. 4 and 2 is 6, 1 and 1 is 2. So we get that the final answer here is 26. And since both of these numbers ended up being positive, the final sum is going to be positive 26. Okay, so if we evaluate 12 minus x for negative 14, we get positive 26. Okay, I don't think addition or subtraction of integers is necessarily the hardest thing you're ever going to see. You definitely want to practice it though, because I find a lot of times on assessments, students make mistakes on the easy stuff because they don't practice it enough. So make sure you get some good practice with adding and subtracting. And then next up, I believe we're going to look at multiplication and division.